Welcome to Sakshi TV's special immigration show with attorney Ms. Prashanthi Reddy from Law Offices of Prashanthi Reddy PLLC. Ms. Reddy needs no introduction, but if you need consultation, please log on to reddyesq.com for contact information. Today's topic is the F1 loss of ACICS accreditation and law effect on students and the FAQs related to that. We will continue the knowledge session along with the news and updates on latest immigration followed by Q&A. And before we get into the topic, you can call us on the numbers displayed on the screen to ask questions related to immigration and also ask tips. Hi, Ms. Reddy, how are you doing?
Hi, Tony. I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Very well, thank you. So today we've chosen a completely different topic. And it's actually one of the very few times that we've discussed F1. And today we're going to talk about just that. So do you have any updates to share on Ms. Reddy, or should we directly get into the topic?
Let's get into the topic because the topic itself is
an update.
An update.
So Ms. Reddy, we also do have some set of FAQs related to F1. Do you want me to start off with that?
Yeah.
Right. So the first one is, what is an I-20, Ms. Reddy, and how can a person get one?
So basically an I-20 is a form that's given by the university, and based on that form, you can then apply for admission, change your status to an F1, or apply for consular processing.
Right. And what is a CPT, Ms. Reddy?
CPT is basically curricular practical training, and curricular practical training is usually given to a person, to a student who has completed, actually CPT is given while the person is still studying. So you have to have special permission from your designated student officer, the DSO, to get CPT. It has to be endorsed in that I-20 form that we just talked about. And once that is done, what happens is you're allowed to work while you're studying. While you're taking classes, you can also work as long as you maintain your full-time F1 status and take enough credits. You can work on a CPT or curricular practical training while you're studying full-time. Of course, the university or the college has to offer CPT, which means they have to be a program. They have to have a program via which they offer CPT, and CPT actually has credits. So they have to have a structure whereby the practical training is necessary to actually learn learn the theory. So say they have a course in developing and designing software or something like that. So that course might have a practical component to it, and that might require that you have practical experience in that particular software. And so you're allowed to take employment outside of the college campus, which is the only time that you actually can do that. Otherwise, you're allowed to only work for 20 hours on campus if you're a full-time F1 student. But if you have this special permission from your DSO, and if it is then endorsed in your I-20, you can work for an employer, provided that the work that you're doing, as I said, is related to the course that you're taking, and provided that CPT is an integral and essential part of the course that you're doing. So, there's some restrictions on it, but as long as those restrictions are met, anyone can, take CPT. There's a lot of controversy about CPT because some universities are offering day one CPT. Because what's happening is students are on an F1, and then they're trying to get a H1 and they're not able to. So after their F1 is over, they take another course, like maybe another master's degree, because they don't want to leave the country. So they prolong their F1 status, and they also want to work. So they take F1, they take a second master's and take day one CPT, which allows them to work as if they were on a H1. So they're trying to meet their requirements without, the H1, because the H1 having the lottery system not being available for only a short period of time every year, and then only 1/3 or less people get selected for the lottery, 1/4 last year. So all this provides challenges to students, and they need to find another way where they can meet their goals and keep their jobs, etc. So this has become one medium whereby they can continue their work. So there is some controversy about that, but so far, even though we get a lot of RFEs on F1s and CPT and Day 1 CPT, we haven't seen denials. So far so good, but that can change anytime, because I think if you look deep into the actual rules, they don't allow Day 1 CPT, but they seem to be allowing it right now. So so far so good, as I said.
Right. So that's about CPT, but what's an OPT, Ms. Reddy?
See, OPT is optional practical training, so it's not needed as part of the curriculum. CPT is curriculum practical training, and CPT you get credits as part of your curriculum for CPT. OPT is optional practical training, which means this is something that you get after you complete your at least 1 year. If you have a 1 year course that you've done, doesn't have to be a 2 year or a 5 year course. Minimum course that you need to take is a 1 year course. So you could do a 1 year master's program, and you could be eligible for OPT. OPT is generally for 12 months, and you have to work during your OPT period, but in order to maintain it. But the work could be voluntary, which means that it need not be paid. It can be unpaid work. So that's the beauty of OPT, and you can remain, you can take 90 days off, so without having to work. So that's another plus point. So this is what OPT is. And again, OPT also has to be related to the degree that you studied.
Right. And what are the eligibility requirements for an F1 OPT, Ms. Reddy?
Well, for an optional practical training, you have to be a full-time student for at least 1 academic year, as I was saying, just preceding the submission of your OPT application. You should be maintaining a valid F1 status. Say you lost status, then you won't be eligible for OPT. You'll have to regain or reinstate your status and then file for OPT if that happens. Also, as I again mentioned, that you have to intend to work in a position that's directly related to your field of study. So if you did your, say, master's in computer science, you can't then just go and work as a financial analyst. You have to work in that IT related area that you took your master's in.
Right. And when can a student apply?
If you're a student completing the first academic year of study, that means if you're in a 1 year program, the earliest you can submit the application is 90 days prior to completion of your academic year. So you can apply in advance, and the maximum is 60 days after. You have a 60 days grace period to apply. So that's the application period. So pretty much you have to make sure that you keep within those periods, because if you overshoot the 60 days, then you will not be eligible for OPT, and then for anything actually, because that's the 60 days is grace period within which you can either file for OPT or file for a change of status to some other status like a H1 or F1, or you can transfer schools or file for extend your F1 if you're doing another master's.
Right. And what could you tell us about the dates of OPT authorization?
So the OPT is given for 1 year, generally. Right. It's for 12 months. So you have to make sure that when you get the card that it has the entire 12 months. And the beginning date for OPT can not be more than 60 days after the date you completed your status. So you have to make sure that the dates match. But generally OPT is for 12 months.
Right. Right, and I think my next question is kind of very crucial for a lot of people because in a lot of cases that I've personally seen as well, F1 getting an F1 visa is kind of relatively a little easier or doable or achievable than an H1, where a lot of the people get stuck is converting their F1 into an H1B. So, how does the process work? How can a student convert their F1 visa into an H1B, and what are the kind of hurdles that probably they'd face, or how can they be prepared for this entire process? And if you could also tell us how the process is like, or at least a summary of it.
Yeah, so you have to file a change of status from an F1 to a H1. And in order to file a change of status, you have to, of course, show that you are in status before you could file a change of status. So the prerequisite is that you have to be in status and you have to show proof of status. In order to file a change of status, you have to either be not subject to the cap, which is you have to be working for a cap exempt organization if you've never worked for a H1 before, because then you'll be subject to the cap. Or you have to file during that period when the cap opens up in March, April. You have to file for a lottery. You have to register for the lottery, and then if you get picked, you'll have 90 days to file for a change of status from F1 to H1. And usually that change of status, the start date of the change of status will only be October 1st of that year. And the reason why it's October 1st is because that's when the fiscal year actually starts. So you have to make sure that you're in status, on F1 status, until October 1st. So make sure you're in status, not on the date you're actually filing, but you can file 6 months in advance, but until the date that you you actually get the approval, or October 1st, you have to be in status. Of course, there's this new thing called cap gap, whereby USCIS is giving you artificial status and bridging the gap between your F1 and H1, because they know that you're filing in advance and H1 starts from October 1st. As long as you show that you're in status as of the time of filing the H1, that cap gap extends until October 1st automatically. So that's one good thing that USCIS has done a few years ago.
Right. And if you could also tell us probably a certain do's and don'ts of converting an F1 into an H1B, or some key points to keep in mind.
Right. So key points is make sure you maintain your status. If you've been on day one CPT, as we discussed, there are some pitfalls for day one CPT. You might get an RFE. We get a lot of RFEs for students. So you have to make sure that you have all the documentation ready to show that you've been maintaining your status. You've been going to school, you've taken only the number of online credits that you're allowed to take. The rest of the time you've gone in person to school. The CPT, if you're on CPT, was required and was an integral and essential part of your curriculum. If you were on OPT, then that you actually worked on OPT. Though it's voluntary, you still have to have a job offer and you have to actually work in order to maintain your OPT. So those are some of the points to keep in mind while filing for a change of status from an F to a H. And the rest of, you have to also make sure that you qualify for the H, of course, that you have a degree that is related to the job and that the job requires a bachelor's degree in a specific field.
Right. And can a person get the H1B stamp in USA itself, Ms. Reddy?
No, you can't get a stamp. You can file a change of status from F to H and you can seamlessly work then on a H1 application. But if you want to get a visa, so a visa is different from status. If you want to get a visa which allows you to travel, a visa doesn't give you any status. It's the I-94, the change of status application, that gives you status. But if you were to travel in the future in order to come back, you would need a visa. And for that, you'd have to go, when you're traveling, the next time you travel, you have to go to the consulate, visit the consulate, and get a visa stamped in your passport and come in. Earlier, especially in extension situations, there was something called visa revalidation, where you actually didn't have to leave the country to get an extension of your visa, not a first-time visa, but an extension. You could send it to the Department of State, send your passport, and they would stamp the visa in the passport. That was a great rule that they had, and hopefully it'll come back at some point when they have the resources to do it. But as of now, in order to get a visa stamped, you have to go to the consulate in your home country, most probably.
Right. And could you tell us what SEVIS is, Ms. Reddy?
Yeah, so SEVIS is very important, and we keep hearing about it in connection with the F1. So United States implemented the SEVIS program, the Student and Exchange Visitor Information System. It's kind of like a portal, and universities issuing I-20s have to enter the students' information into the SEVIS database, and this information is then accessed by the consulates as well. So if your university does not enter your information in the database, your visa won't be issued. So the SEVIS has to always be kept updated. And for some reason, if your SEVIS is not updated or the DSO makes a mistake in entering your information, doesn't change the status on the SEVIS database, you pretty much will become out of status. So it's become a very crucial tool for F1, for a student to maintain status, and often they don't have control over what's on your SEVIS database, because that's only DSO has control on it, and sometimes DSOs don't do a very good job in updating or putting in information in that SEVIS database, and we see students falling out of status because of that.
Right. And since we're still, our whole topic is about F1, we've discussed the many aspects of it. Could you also tell us when is the right time to apply for a student visa, Ms. Reddy?
Well, if you're filing a student visa, you can apply prior to, obviously you have to apply prior to the admission date on your I-20 form. And there is an enrollment date mentioned in the I-20 form for when it is valid. So generally people apply about 120 days before that date, so that they have enough time to either change status or come into the country by the time that your college actually starts, because you want to be in the US for the first day of school.
Right. Why we're on the subject of school, Ms. Reddy. So a lot of people, tend to want to change their courses or in the university or school that they've chosen first after going back to the US. They decide on one course while they're here in India, and after going there to the US, they want to change their course or university or school. Is that okay?
Yeah, they can transfer schools. So what they need to do is get admission into another university, and then have the SEVIS transferred to the other university, and they can transfer from one school to the other. So that is, it is allowed. Transfer of schools from one school to the other is allowed once the student comes here. But again, there are certain rules that have to be followed and certain regulations. So as long as they follow that, yes, one can transfer schools from one school to another. That shouldn't be a problem. Tony, shall we talk about that our topic of the hour, the ACICS, before? Then we can go back to the questions again.
Yeah, of course, Ms. Reddy, please.
So that, I just want to make sure we have enough time.
Right.
So ACICS is an accreditation agency. Right. And it's called the Accrediting Council for Independent Colleges and Schools. It's an accrediting agency that accredits, from the name of it, private schools, and for-profit schools and private schools. This was very popular among private schools, this accrediting agency. But as early as 2015, the Department of Education was not happy with this ACICS, because they saw that there's a lot of issues with them offering accreditation, not checking the university's background properly, not following the rules, etc. So they have been threatening to withdraw accreditation of this ACICS organization from 2015. Then there was a lawsuit, etc., etc. So now, as of August 19th, I believe, the US Department of Education has announced that it no longer recognizes ACICS as an accrediting agency. How does this affect us, and why should we care about it? If you are an F1 student and say you're applying for your OPT, STEM OPT 24-month extension, regulations require them for a person to be able to file an extension to have a master's degree from an accredited university. So it has to be accredited by one of the many agencies. So say it was accredited by ACICS, then if you have filed the OPT extension, if you're going to file it, if you file it, you'll most probably get an RFE. They'll ask you to show if there's any other agency that university has accreditation with. If you have not filed it, most probably you won't be able to until that school actually applies and gets pre-accredited or accredited for one of the other agencies that are acceptable to the US Department of Education. So very important, a student can lose status, may not be able to apply for OPT if such an accreditation is not available. So SEVP has said that they will provide guidance to affected students. For students who have gone to those universities, they have said that they will send them letters, but I think if you if you're an F1 student, you should check the accreditation of your university, contact your DSO or go to their website and check, what agency they are accredited with. And if it is ACICS, then you have to plan on transferring schools. I believe you can do that in 60 days. Or if your university is applying for other accreditation and Department of Education is allowing them to continue, then you should be able to finish your course there. So that really depends. If ACICS, the school chooses to voluntarily withdraw its certification from ACICS, then a student who belongs to that school can then provide evidence that they're affiliated to a proper accreditation agency, and then can continue with that school. Otherwise, they'll have to leave and file for a transfer of schools, etc. A lot of people file for a change of status to an F1 and they go to a language school. They go to a school to learn English language, and because this is an easiest admission to get, especially for people who are not qualified to do other things, get a technical degree or get a master's degree. They start with this. So those people, this ACICS has been an accreditation agency for these English language study programs. So these are the like ZONI, etc. So these are the institutions that are going to be affected. So if you did file a change of status, you will most probably receive an RFE. But as long as your degree, you've received your degree before August 19, 2022, or as long as the accreditation was, you filed before August 19, 2022, you should be fine, because they lost their accreditation only after that. So anything that happened before, you're fine, but if it happened after, then you will most probably get an RFE. They'll ask you to then show that the university that you're applying to is accredited. In the same way, the 24-month STEM OPT extension, so USCIS will issue, if you've already filed, USCIS will issue a denial to any student who's filed a 765 STEM OPT extension. If the STEM degree, that's the basis for the STEM OPT, was obtained accreditation from ACICS, and the student's DSO recommended the STEM OPT extension after August 19, 2022. So if they approved for STEM OPT on their I-20 after August 19, 2020, you will be affected. If it's before that, then as I said, at that time, since it was a valid accreditation agency, you should be fine. But after that, you will have a problem. There are other impacts also with the loss of ACICS, and One of them is, of course, if you have a degree that after August 19, 2020, that was accredited by ACICS, your H1B is an issue, because if you fall under the master's cap, if you're filing for an H1B under cap subject, then, and if you have a degree from this agency, and, so then that'll be a problem, because they have lost that accreditation. So you will not be able to file under the master's cap program. Maybe you can file under the bachelor's cap. So that's a big problem. Also, if you have an I-140, you file an I-140. And if you file it after August 19, 2022, again, same problem. Your master's degree will not be recognized if you filed your labor certification based on that degree.
Right.
Unless the college got accreditation after that. Okay. So as you can see, loss of accreditation affects many ways. Yeah. Also, another last way that it affects is there is a certain fee that, so if you're cap exempt, for example, you could be cap exempt because your university is an institution of higher education and you're going to be working for that institution. It's a non-profit institution of higher education. But if that institution of higher education was accredited by ACICS and has lost its accreditation, then you will not be able to file a H1B master's cap program.
Right.
That's
the update.
No, that's another problem. Also a problem with the fee. You will no longer be a fee exempt organization. So if you're filing for a H1, you'll have to pay the higher fee. So, there are many issues that come into play with this loss of accreditation. But I'm hoping, because this has been going on for a while, most of those colleges would have been aware that this is going on, and hopefully they would have corrected themselves or gotten proper accreditation, within that period and now. And I'm hoping that not too many students will be affected.
Right. And we hope so too, Ms. Reddy. And like always, with that, we come to the end of the session, and we have, right. So thank you, Ms. Reddy. We'll meet again in the next episode. You're watching Sakshi Live, and this is Torvi. Thank you.